Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. We're kicking off this week as IT Nation will be going live tomorrow. But I had an opportunity to bring a vendor onto the show, which we know is typically not something we do on MSP 1337. But after talking to one of the employees of Drive Savers while I was at EMEACon channel, or sorry, CompTIA's ChannelCon EMEA, I realized how little I knew about saving data off of drives outside of physical failure. And so I asked Sarah and Andy to join me today. So Andy and Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. So I'm Sarah. I have been with Drive Savers for 22 years now in multiple roles. Um, so I work with our business development team, largely with our engineering team, sales. And Andy, you tell more about what you do.
Sure. Well, thanks for having us, Chris. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk to the CompTIA community as we are members and really and have supported the community for a long time. So I am responsible for business development at Drive Savers, specifically working with the incident response and cyber response community or ecosystem of companies, the incident response companies, the restoration services firms, the forensics firms, all the firms that encounter data loss as part of a cybersecurity incident.
That's
And
um
by the
that's
way, I've spent
crazy.
10 years in data recovery and especially the last 5 specifically focused on the cyber market.
Wow. So I should disclaimer here. So my views on this show in theory are those of my own and not necessarily reflective of CompTIA. The MSP 1337 has been around now for going on. We're wrapping up season 4, 200 plus episodes, and I actually had to articulate that I would like to keep the show going when I came to CompTIA. So while they are my own
Okay.
opinions, you're not wrong in saying what you did. I just want to make sure that we are clear that this is not a CompTIA sponsored podcast. And that's kind of the beauty of it. So I have the luxury of bringing CompTIA staff on because, well, I know all of them. But I
Hmm.
also have the opportunity to take this in a direction where it's like, yes, I always say I want to support CompTIA. That's a great part about this. But I can also bring vendors on and have conversations that may get maybe a little bit less neutral, but the goal always is to be vendor neutral, as is CompTIA. But I think it's part of like just being candid. It's a raw conversation to share with our community. But
Understood. All right.
all right, cool. So disclaimers out of the way. I want to go back a little bit because this was the part that was intriguing to me. And for anybody that's been in the interesting industry more than 10, 15 years knows that once upon a time, the spinning disks of the world were the nightmare for any IT company, whether it was inside a laptop or desktop or server. And so, Sarah, I thought it'd be good to kind of have you take us through some of the you know, we don't have to go too deep in the challenges of physical drive failure back then, but I think what I really want to get to is that it's 2024 and physical drive failure still exists. And then I want to shift it to talking about which I never even thought about, like, is that there's companies out there that specialize in recovering data because an incident has occurred off of a physical medium. So, Sarah, walk us through a little bit, like, the intriguing, I think, intriguing of what it was like to pull data off of essentially, a failed drive.
So it is. It's changed so much. When I started, of course, it was spinning drives. I feel like Drive Savers is still really known as being the experts in physical failure, which we are. And then as time went on and SSDs came in and it was all like, oh, they're never going to be recoverable.
Sure.
And there we have a a full department that specializes specifically in flash memory. It's a different beast entirely, um, but they're recoverable. And then the cloud came on. It was like, oh, data recovery, it's gonna be over. Everything's gonna be in the cloud. No one is going to, you know, ever need their data recovered again. Um, and unfortunately, that's not true.
Sure.
It's you have to, first you have to back up, then you have to verify the backup. Um, and then we came into this current landscape with threat actors and ransomware. And I think because of that, manufacturers and IT companies, systems are so much more robust that the failures are different. And much more of what we do is needing to access data that it's not physically damaged, but somehow logically it's been deleted, it's been corrupted, it's inaccessible. So while we still do, physical damage, every day, so much more of our work is with data that's logically inaccessible.
Makes me think about like the, Android, iPhone, mobile devices basically are in essence, a somewhere between a 64 and a 512 roughly storage device that's storing all kinds of stuff on it. I remember the first time I had to go from one iPhone to the next and realized that because I didn't follow the exact instructions, I essentially wiped my new device empty. Had I not had a backup of my phone, I would have essentially been starting over with everything. And surprisingly, we use our phones. Like when it's time to load apps back onto a mobile device, it's way different than trying to load it on your desktop or laptop because it's like all that data at your fingertips. And when you have to log back into an app and the cache isn't there and all of those things, it's a nightmare. Like I had no idea it'd been so long since I had swapped phones, which gives you an idea how long I hold on to my iPhone. So you guys do a lot just on the physical recovery side. You guys do way more than just hard drives. You do like iPhones and I assume Android and really there's probably if it stores data and is digital, that's probably in your
Yeah.
wheelhouse.
If it stores data with a one and a zero, we will work on it. We've worked on AEDs, fish finders,
Sure.
anything. Yeah.
Well, and really, wow, that's really interesting. So going back, so you guys have been around a long time, like since the 80s, if I recall. So like, do you still see drives from that long ago coming up with needing to have data recovered?
We still sometimes see floppy drives. Um, so yeah,
Well, on the floppy side, when you say floppy, we're talking five and a quarter or the three and a halves?
I couldn't say, but again, if it stores data with a one and a zero,
Sure, sure.
we will find a way.
Well,
So
yeah, there actually is a story in the news very recently
right.
about San Francisco MTA moving off of floppy disks.
That's why I was asking. That was what came to mind for me
I'm
too, was
thinking,
that those are five and a quarters.
yeah, they were five and a quarter, or they are five and a quarters,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of them.
Yeah, that would be quite a stack of of what would be considered almost disposable media.
All right. Well, our lab looks like a museum when it comes to read-write devices.
Wow.
We actually
That's
do have a museum, and the hallways are full of really fantastic things. Someone once described it as Disneyland for geeks. Uh,
That sounds about right. Like there is some nostalgia when you see those, especially for those of us growing up in the 80s and 90s of things like, how we modded three and a halves. So like, if you bought software from a vendor, like let's just say it was Microsoft Office or Windows and it came on floppy drives, the three and a halves, people figured out real quick that they could go and flip the little switch and make it a writable disk and or put tape over it to make it writable. And then you'd order more disks, and it was a really cheap option for those that needed floppies, right? Like you didn't have to go to Radio Shack. Oh my word, I just aged all of
Radio
us, Radio
Shack.
Shack.
Yes, you did.
So
Thanks for
shifting
not sharing that
gears,
hack at the time, too.
right, right. Like this, yeah. This is not for those of you that need floppies today. You should not do that, right? Go to
Right.
Radio Shack and buy some new floppies if you can find one. I did see one internationally, so they do exist in places. They're just very, very rare. So shifting gears a little bit, I think the physical part is still super cool. I think it's just it blows my mind that there's the other side of it too, and I don't know if you guys do this, but the need to wipe data completely off the drive.
Hmm.
So do you do that as well? Just curious.
Well, before we dispose of anything, we make sure that,
Sure,
something's gone. And we do some erasure verification, but
gotcha.
we pretty much stick to
To
recovery.
just getting the data on there, yeah. It's not you're not a data disposal service.
No, no.
That could jeopardize the integrity of this whole conversation if that was included. Uh, shifting gears, I get super excited thinking about the shift from the physical side. I think that's more of the nostalgia in me, but like shifting gears to where Andy started talking about the whole threat landscape, what happens to infrastructure that's been hit by encryption, whether it's done accidentally or it's done through threat actors. What do you guys generally see? I mean, I've been through lots of, I don't know, I shouldn't say a lot. I've been through plenty of negotiations with threat actors trying to reduce the amount of cost or literally just usually buying time to see what we can or can't do with regards to do we need to actually ever pay the ransom and get stuff back through them, or if we have what we need. Um, what do you guys see?
I'll let you take this one, Andy.
Sure. Well, we really see three primary types of scenarios relative to you know, cybersecurity incidents, whether it's ransomware or malware, whatever the attack type is. The three primary scenarios we see are deletion, whether it's a malicious, an intentional deletion, or an accidental deletion, corruption, uh, and um, and then uh, a oh gosh, I just blanked on the third. Oh
Crypto.
yeah, no, I think the corruption had two subsets.
Oh,
One is
gotcha.
corruption that can occur on the encryption side, and corruption that can occur as a part of the decryption process.
Sure.
So those are really the three
In
scenarios.
incomplete encryption, Andy, was what we were missing there.
Yes, incomplete encryption, exactly. So we see, so really those are you, the three basic scenarios. The deletion can occur anyway, but it's a deletion's a deletion. And
Sure.
then that corruption are really, broken down into two, either encryption related or decryption related.
Gotcha.
So
I find I think this was recently within the last couple of weeks. I found it fascinating. There was a scenario where cryptocurrency that was the wallet was encrypted, and when the wallet had been initially created, I forget how many coins were on it or whatever the currency was, but it was worth about, I think, six or $7,000 at the time. So it's been going on 10 years now. And today it's worth a little over $3.5 million. And what was interesting is the way in which they were able to recover it was they basically turned back time and essentially, the idea behind randomly generated passwords, if you can go back to the timeline or get close enough to when the password was generated, it may in fact generate the exact same password again, proving that while it's random as far as the usage of the password, if you have the right tools in place, things aren't so random as we see them on from the human eyes perspective.
That's a great
very
story.
true and a
Andy,
great story.
I, why don't we talk about like a recovery that we've done to give some examples of how we do
That'd be
it?
great.
About um, the one we talked about earlier with incomplete encryption.
Sure. Yeah, I think this case that we handled, you know, over the last 120 days was from the beginning to end. Um, it took place in the last 120 days, so it's recent news, a very recent case for us. It really illustrates two components of the effects of a cyber incident. So we were contacted by an incident response company that was working on a case. They had been engaged with this client for over a month. They had they had worked with they had negotiated with the threat actor group. They had acquired a decryptor and begun decrypting, decrypting systems and files, or they cleaned the environment and they were decrypting the files that had been encrypted. So when they first called us, they said we have one critical file server that that stores 1.6 or 1.7 million files that is encrypted, and we can't, and it's stored in a virtual disk, and we can't access that virtual disk. So when on that first call, we started talking about that virtual disk, what had happened during the attack, after the attack, what steps had been taken to try to access that information. And then we asked them about the rest of the environment as well, and found out that this was their primary file server. They also had been using Veeam as a backup tool, and found out that um, they had a copy of their backup file that was damaged as well, and that was on a separate server. So to illustrate kind of the point, um, the primary server had been deleted, the VMDK. The backup server we found through using our techniques and our tools that the database file where Veeam stores its backup information was corrupted because of an incomplete encryption, which were the words that I was looking for in Sarah
Sure.
we went through a couple of minutes ago. So what we had to do in this case was pursue parallel paths, data recovery for both of those two scenarios, so at the end conclusion, we ended up with about 98% of the files recovered out of 1.6 or 1.7 million files. We had to do those, put together all the files we recovered from the primary file server, where there was a deletion of the virtual disk, and the files that we recovered from the Veeam recovery. So we have, so what it really illustrates is that we need both custom software recovery tools that the DriveSavers team has built over time to do data recovery from virtual environments, and then separately custom data recovery software to recover specifically Veeam backup files. So there are multiple layers involved in the recovery process, and this is a great illustration of two different, deletion scenarios or inaccessibility scenarios,
Yeah.
where it requires different techniques, different tools, but the same team actually worked on it.
I mean, to me, this
That's
is exciting. I mean, not for the poor person going through it, company going through it, because,
right.
they lost their data. They had to, pay the ransom. Some of it worked, but these, critical files that they needed for their business were inaccessible.
Sure.
And then for us to be able to do, the first one where there was deletion and we got some of the data, but there was, file tree structure damage.
Yeah.
Take, the other one with the incomplete encryption, work with that, layer the two of them together, sort of like, taking two puzzles and
Right.
them together and got back we got 98% of the data, but luckily every critical file that they needed. So
It makes me think of trying to do, buying, three puzzles. They all have different pictures, but they're the same puzzle pieces, and you have to put them together upside down. Like you're
without the box, yeah.
without the box. Like some of it is, and then you flip the puzzles back over, and only one of the pictures looks close to the right, just because of the way in which they're put together. It that whole experience just I don't think I could work in that model because to me, like as soon as I start trying to restore something or fix something, like if I can't, it's like somehow my fault that I can't get their data back, or just someone tells you their horror story of the incident that they're going through or the event that they went through, and you're like you start to like take on more than empathy, like you start to feel like you're going through this same thing, like as if it's a VR experience, and it's not. But like these things are so stressful to those that go through it that I think anybody that's trying to help starts to take on some of that pain a little bit. Do you guys run into that at all? Is there an emotional attachment that happens, or are you able to just sort of separate the two?
No, I mean, for me, there's definitely an emotional attachment. Um, when I was doing the recoveries myself, I was with the team that did the physical flash memory damage for several years. I actually had to try avoiding looking at the notes. I just
Sure.
like tell me about the device and the damage because, if I looked at the stories behind it, I would just think, well, I never need to go home again. I'll
Right.
just work on this until I get it back for you.
Sure. So
There,
so
there
with
is,
yeah,
that's
go
a
ahead.
great question though. I was just going to add that, that there, since we just wrapped up the World Series, and for any baseball fans out there, uh, there are times in the clean room or in the lab environment where it looks like a home run celebration.
Mhm.
When the player hits a home run and goes back to the dugout and high fives everybody, it looks like that in our lab sometimes, where all of a sudden the something is unlocked and we have access to those files that we've been working on. That's there's a real celebration and real joy that comes along with that.
I
I'm
can
So
not going to share
imagine.
what it is, but I had a celebration song that I would put on and dance around the room. I got a really hard one.
So I would venture that you probably you mentioned, of working with a forensics company. Do you often or deal with, I shouldn't say often, but do you deal with at all forensics coming to you and the urgency is we need to figure out because it's encrypted, we can't tell maybe even where it originated, like just to get a level of data off of it that says we've got, because I imagine like, that's kind of the first question. And the second question would be like, I'll just even say 10 years ago, 10 years data recovery for whatever you were throwing at it, the time factor on what that processing power requirements are to do that workload. I would imagine that today the workload timeline wise, regardless of who's asking and how urgent it might be, you're able to do things a whole lot faster. I mean, you saw with Elon Musk putting together a supercomputer in 19 days, and previously it was like 12 months. So I mean, like hardware and horsepower to do some of this work. I mean, what has that been like over like especially the last couple of years?
That's a hard one for me to ask. I mean, because also people have so much more data. I think of what we were
Okay,
talking with phones earlier. I mean, did you ever imagine you would need that much data that you would carry around with you in your pocket? Um, so for us, looking for a specific file out of, terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data, it is a lot of processing. So it's something that, yeah, even a handful of years ago would have been impossible,
sure.
but um, it does still, it can take some time. Um, and there are times that, like Andy was saying that we, build custom tools that, you know, we need to understand the data loss, build a test environment, you know, delete or corrupt some data on it ourselves, figure that out. So, some data recoveries are, we can have a company back up and running by the next morning, and others unfortunately can take more time. It's
It seems like that's kind of, you and I briefly talked about this when we were in London about, the evaluation process and how that's kind of part of like, do a discovery, have a conversation, and, at least it's kind of like taking your car in for an estimate, right? Like, my wife just had a deer hit the side of the car. They're really bright animals. Like somehow they think that they can go through moving objects. And then, of course, the police report showed that there was the icon on the dot matrix printer made it look like it was a reindeer. So we're pretty confident there's going to be no Christmas this year because, well, Santa is going to be short a reindeer. We do not have those here, but that's what it looked like on the paper. But it made me think about like the when you're talking to insurance, like just the steps that go through this, and then thinking about things like I give you a hard drive or virtual or otherwise, and it's like, well, what kind of data is on it? And what laws and requirements are put on, because you're suddenly going into like it could be CUI data, it could be patient health information, and you're dealing with now on a global scale. So that would include things like GDPR. How do you guys navigate that ecosystem, if you will?
Let's go
Well,
back to the evaluation, because we do on, single drives, an absolutely free evaluation.
Sure,
So you call us up, we'll, talk you through it on the phone, but we will send an overnight label, get the device to us, evaluate it, call back, tell you, what we think, where the price is, and the customer can then decide at that point, is this worth it to them? Is it not? And it is absolutely free to find out
I would have
on.
shipped you my car then because it's got a hard drive in it.
I would have liked just the drive, but
Yeah,
and we have done car systems. I can think of one from a Tesla where someone was blaming the accident on the other driver, and they had brought the car in for repair, and that drive that it has had been reset, so it showed up as nothing on it. And again, Andy was talking about the celebrations. We got the data back, and we're watching it just to be sure, we have the critical file. And it was so obvious that the other driver was at fault and our customer, was not liable. We weren't
awesome.
celebrating in the
Yeah,
lab.
that is a celebration. I think I've narrowed it down to it was I know who it is. No.
so
So, and
so
then you want to talk about our sort of evaluation consultation process on
sure.
the more complex jobs.
Yeah, you know, one of the basic, um, you know, situations that we see are, well, think about the common attribute across all these cyber incidents is that while the threat actors are getting access into those corporate networks, and they are deploying their malware,
Hmm.
they are also operating in that environment to collect information, exfiltrate sometimes the most valuable data, and then deleting backups. So there's this common scenario of deletion, whether it's the primary server, the backup server. It just depends on how the threat actor um, is is conducting the attack. But we
Sure.
so what we will do though, since a lot of those deletions or corruptions, as we've said, are on servers, we will also do a discovery phase, and a lot of times we can do it remotely because and kind of back to your question about how do we work with the ecosystem. So I'll speak to that in a second. The usually the IT teams have been mobilized. The security, depending on the size of the organization, if that IT team also has security responsibility, they've also called their MSP. They've also called, third parties, and when they're and a lot of times when there's cyber insurance, the insurance company recommends a data privacy law firm that specializes
Sure.
in cyber to protect and protect the client and manage the risk associated with that incident. And then there are incident response and restoration services firms. So you talked about, okay,
Sure.
what happens from a restoration standpoint? They have to eradicate uh, the malware, clean the environment, and they're often just faced with rebuilding systems and getting that company operational again, from a network infrastructure, file server, application server, and communications perspective, the voice and email, that kind of thing. Um, so when they run into those deletions, though, what we get a phone call. Sometimes it's from the MSP, sometimes who's being asked to restore files into the environment, or from the IT team, or from the incident response and restoration firms saying, hey, we've found data loss. And we will work in collaboration with those teams to, if possible, conduct a remote evaluation. So just by connecting remotely with secure software, we
Sure.
can do an examination and an assessment. Um, Otherwise, if we see kind of the attributes that would prevent us from accessing it remotely in a secure manner, or the system's completely just inoperable, that's when we'll have them ship the system in, and we'll do conduct a more paid discovery. But I wanted to back up and kind of illustrate that and answer your question about how we work with the ecosystem.
Yeah.
We complement all those other service providers with really what looks like what is a specialty service that helps them in their efforts.
So let me ask kind of a final question. I think this is probably a really loaded question. So my job day to day is I oversee the cybersecurity compliance programs for membership at CompTIA. We have a trust mark as a program for MSPs to get audited or assessed against a set of safeguards. The trust mark is not unique. It's Frankenstein of several different frameworks. But I was curious, I know that you guys have gone to great lengths to meet certain regulatory requirements and have aligned yourself to ensuring that you meet things like GDPR and others. Do you have within that how you help organizations satisfy safeguards by incorporating? I feel like if I was an MSP today, that I would want an organization like DriveSavers as a vendor that I work with, and I have established policies and process and procedures in place so that when it comes to things like business disruption and business continuity and DRIR, that I'm not just saying, oh yeah, we're using XYZ vendor and we got your data, it's backed up. I feel like this is getting into like setting the groundwork for when there is an incident to reduce that blast radius and be, minimize the impact to the organization.
So like you said, we've done, a lot of work to have, all of our certifications in place. We're, HIPAA compliant, we're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. It's, we're going to see your data.
Yeah,
So you need to send it someplace secure. And, like you said, you rarely have, vendors on your show. And, I felt that last week in London that there was some hesitation to engage with a vendor. Um, but, we're a service. We don't have
sure.
a product to sell you. And in engaging with us sooner, we can get that in place. We can have a master service agreement. We can have a non-disclosure in place. We can get all of that set up, all of that language. So, the MSP feels secure, whoever the partner might be. And, the, breach coach can know that we are also a secure vendor. Um, so yeah, I mean, getting that in place so an incident does occur, you can
Yeah.
help your customers so much more quickly.
Yeah, the take action comes into play as you now have a path forward because you have a path in place.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And
Exactly.
and you know us, you know what we can do, what we're capable of.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing is that sometimes it'll be a customer that calls us because they've got people in place and that company's doing everything they can, and they just haven't realized, like you were saying, that some of this is possible. Um,
Yeah, the what is possible is something that I feel like every day in the space now is not something that most of us have thought about until it's basically put in front of us. It's kind of like going to a vendor show or a tech floor and identifying vendors that solve for problems in your organization that you didn't know you had until you go and do
yes.
that. But I think the
Yeah.
flip side of this is also true that there's so much that is happening so fast. The rate at which technology is evolving to enable us to do things that we never thought possible means that we have to stop thinking that it's not possible and start asking questions like, maybe it is possible. Now, I wouldn't propose asking, say, ChatGPT because it may actually give you, three lies and a truth instead of three truths and a lie, and then rationalize why it believes it's true. So I digress. Anything
Yeah.
else that you guys would like to share? I think this has been great information. I think it really opens the eyes of our listeners to what is possible And I really appreciate you guys being willing to share.
I would
Thanks.
just, please call us. We'd love to share more with you, like I said, to get things set up. If you are in an unfortunate, data loss, it's free to find out what we can do to, have a conversation, to have an evaluation. And, it might end up that you don't need us or
Sure.
data's not worth it. But please just, give us a call.
Yeah, and I would add to the point that about, not necessarily realizing or even thinking about, you know, data recovery in one of these, when you've experienced a cyber attack, and you're trying to figure out how to recover from that. If this resonates with anyone who has been thinking about, traditionally CISOs, or CTOs or CIOs have had to develop their, uh, first it was their disaster recovery plans. Now every CISO wants their cyber incident response plan in place, and very few of them contain the line item that says, think of drive savers when data is deleted or corrupted and is inaccessible. And I think that, by being on your podcast and allowing us to help spread the word and increase awareness around what is possible,
Yeah.
um, will hopefully encourage people to think of us. And in the case of the uh, deletion and incomplete encryption that we shared with you, we did learn that if we'd have been involved sooner, we could have recovered more. And
Wow.
when we came in, and then I think that's the entire point of visiting with you today, and having your listeners hear about, you know considering data loss and just
Sure.
checking with us. You know, like Sarah said, it doesn't cost anything, or we can at least give a quick assessment on what we think the recoverability looks like. We're happy to do that, but you know, thank you for having us on and allowing us to spread the gospel around data recovery services.
That's great. Well, for those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks and have a great week.